Welcome to the panel about making Canada an energy superpower. A lot has changed since last year, but before we dive in, I want you to give us a quick run through of your company just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, well, thank you first and foremost. Thank you, Bloomberg and National Bank, for having OPG and myself here today. We're very honored with the opportunity to be here. So Ontario Power Generation, or I'll refer to it as OPG, is one of the largest and most diverse clean energy generator in North America. We have a fleet that covers very much all spectrums of the energy generation. So we have 2 nuclear power plants. They're Darlington Nuclear Generating Station and Pickering Generating Station. We have 66 hydroelectric facilities across Ontario. We also have two combined cycle thermal stations. Through our subsidiary Atura Power, we have 4 natural gas plants, and we're building our 5th now in Ontario. And at our Atura subsidiary, we also have a 250 megawatt battery that we're building, in addition to working on a pilot of hydrogen, where we're looking to blend hydrogen from our largest hydro station at Niagara Falls with natural gas. We also have a solar facility, and we are also here in the United States through our subsidiary Eagle Creek in 18 states, and have 85 hydroelectric facilities. So a very diverse portfolio, but one of the things that we're really excited about is leading the G7 in the first small modular reactor. And that is probably one of the most exciting things that are going on right now, but we have so many projects as we build out Ontario, including life extensions or refurbishments of our nuclear power plant. Darlington, and then now we will be entering that with Pickering. So an exciting time at OPG right now.
Yeah, definitely eager to hear more about SMRs, but David, tell us about Northland.
Well, first off, thanks, Naureen, for having us, and Bloomberg for having us here. We're very excited. So Northland Power, we're a Canadian energy player with a global footprint. We have over nearly 4 decades of experience developing, financing, constructing, and operating clean power infrastructure. We've got an operating capacity of about 3.5 gigawatts, and that's spread across wind, both onshore and offshore, solar, natural gas, and now batteries. We commissioned our first battery energy storage project earlier this year. Our business model is simple: long-term reliable cash flows, disciplined execution, and geographic diversity, which I think is one of our strengths and one of the things we bring to the market.
So Ida, when you were here last year, we were talking about energy security and costs of power. And we've now, both the US and Canada have new administrations. What does this mean for you? And we're talking about Canada becoming an energy superpower.
Yeah, I think a lot has changed since we sat here together, as I reflect a year ago. But I think one of the things, and you would have heard it earlier this morning with the 2 individuals from National Bank talk about this opportunity in front of us here in Canada, right here and right now, as we look at building out to be an energy superpower. And I think what's changed since I was on stage last year and spoke to was that the Ontario government, so Ontario, for those that might not know, about 40% of the population of Canada resides within Ontario. And so the power, we produce 50% of that power in Ontario. And when you look at that, the Ontario government came out with their integrated energy plan. And this is energy for generations. And it's really focused on how do we build out that energy security, but really how do we build out power, not only for ourselves, but for the opportunity to export. Today, we export 5% to the United States or in New York on various days. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how do we build that out? And so the estimation is 75% growth within Ontario of our energy capacity by 2050. And so what you've seen over the last couple of years is real growth. I think we all see it in every jurisdiction that we're in as it relates to real demand is there now. And for decades, we hadn't seen that. It stayed very flat or decreased as we put conservation measures into place. And so you're seeing that real demand come in, and even more as you think about the demand for manufacturing, for industrial, as we talk about data centers, and as we talk about the demand that's needed to actually fuel everything we're doing. When you lift up your cell phone and you go to ChatGPT or you're doing a search function, you need more demand for that through energy. And so when you think about Canada and particularly Ontario being clean energy and you think about our capacity to supply and low cost, it really is an opportunity for us right now. And I think that's where that provides us that long-term view as we build out our grid, not only in nuclear, but in hydro and other renewables, such as batteries, as we think through the future. And I think it's a great opportunity for us.
David, what's changed for you?
Well, I think last year, we were here, I wasn't here, but in kind of reviewing what we've talked about and what we were talking about in other rooms is, last year we were talking about the potential of Canada's electricity sector. I think today we're talking about scale, execution, and investability, speed. How do we get these projects through, right? I talked about the growth in Canada, but we're competing against growth in every jurisdiction we're in, from here through Europe and elsewhere, right? I think the global energy demand is to grow by 80% over the next few decades. So there's a strong competition, I think. And we're also seeing public sentiment evolving as well in Canada, which I think is really important, right? Where Canadians are increasingly supporting a balanced approach, leveraging our oil and gas strengths while also accelerating the shift and the investment into clean investments.
So in the US, it's all about data centers, and the biggest choke point is getting power. Is that driving people to Canada? Are hyperscalers or other developers knocking on your door?
Yeah, I think the reality here is that our borders, and we talk about how close we are between Canada and the United States, and many will say that's part of some of the assets that we have, where we have our closest trading partner right next to each other. And so the ability to think about what does that look like? Of course, data centers are coming and knocking on our doors and asking us, how do we look at that? You look at the partnerships that were announced last year with an organization like Constellation, where they're partnering with Microsoft and reopening up 3 Mile Island, and just the nature of what needs to happen across all of the technology organizations. They're partnering across the fleet. And so those discussions are happening, trying to figure out how do we work with that. The various jurisdictions across Canada are looking through and how do we support through that, and that will be part of the growth. And so I think the opportunity is in front of us, and I think right now what we need to do is really work to make sure that we can execute projects quickly, on time and on budget. And I think that's one of the key things when I look at our organization and our life extension with Darlington. That's a 10-year project. We are in year 9 of that. It was $12.8 billion that we announced a decade ago. We are in year 9. And on that project, we just announced in our last quarterly results that we are going to bring the final unit 4 of that power plant earlier than expected next year in 2026, and we are on budget on that project, including the cost of COVID and inflation that's happened over the last decade. And so you need projects like that to really bring the confidence into the energy sector and nuclear. And so I think this is that opportunity where, as we think about what can we do, it's really executing that piece will be very important for all proponents in Canada as we think about critical infrastructure build.
And David, what about data centers? I mean, yeah. They still are showing an appetite for wind, which I know you do, but you also have a diverse portfolio, yeah. And so that gives an opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, the data center boom is real, but so are bottlenecks, right? So access to power, access to interconnections, permitting, and other pieces of the puzzle. And that, I think that this bleeds into everything we've been talking about in terms of if we're making Canada energy superpower, can we get these projects permitted and off the ground? I mean, Canada has the power that's needed. It has the potential investors to do that behind the scenes, and it has the political stability that I think makes it a prime top tier jurisdiction to hyperscale. If we can solve the grid and permitting puzzle. And I think we're getting there, right? I think the right conversations are happening, and we need to see that action continue, or move that talk into action.
What do you think are the biggest bottlenecks or choke points to making that happen? Here, it's like finding the interconnection and then getting through that process.
We're no different, okay. Right? It's access to grid. It's can you get the power when the scale of power and the reliability of power you need. Is it affordable? And so I think it's again, Canada's no different in terms of some of the questions that are happening are being asked in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, maybe I would add on to that. I think it's also how we Canada across the provinces and territories, energy files are managed at the provinces and territories. And so the commercial arrangements with how you enter into those through a PPA or how you structure that is different. And so I think as data centers come in, we need to be able to have the flexibility based on the jurisdiction to enter into those contracts, because of course they're going to want to come in. It's speed to execution, being able to get there, and then that piece around how do you contract and bring in those partnerships that maybe we haven't done before. And I know in Ontario, we haven't thought through those types of PPAs with a third party coming in for data centers. So I think we have to be quick on speed as to we think about how do we contract those type of relationships and access, and the cost part. It's grid scale costs that come through and versus an individual company that's coming through. So I think it's how quickly can we work through that as well on the contracting side that I think will be important.
Yeah, and then making sure those are investable and financeable, right? And making sure that everyone is we're bringing everyone along in terms of what this needs, the difference that this brings into the business, and making sure we're all understanding that risk and opportunity and where the balance is.
Ida, you mentioned the nuclear deals in the U.S. with hyperscalers. Are you suggesting that you're looking at your nuclear plants for long-term deals with data centers too, or?
So I'm not suggesting anything. I think what I think what I'm alluding to is that the environment is different. And I think we have to really think about what data center needs, hyperscalers requirements. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year that they require continuous power without interruption. And so as you think about that, and you think about various types of renewables, or you think about various types of technologies, nuclear power is one of those technologies that gives you that consistent power. And so I'm not surprised at all that this is happening. I'm not surprised that more announcements won't come, and how we think through that. And I think you have to balance the need of those individual customers relative to the need and the growth of the grid. And so you have to build that out and those considerations. So I think it's a great opportunity right now for nuclear, and we talk about the nuclear renaissance that we're on right now. But it's really important. We're only as good as the last project that we did. And so that project and operational excellence is really critical to make sure that we continue to really focus in on that, to obviously entice investors, as David, you talked about, and bringing in those dollars that will allow us to do those projects.
Now, David, you have a more diverse portfolio geographically. Are you pivoting back to Canada, or how do you look at the opportunities given geopolitical tensions and?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been in Canada. I mean, we're headquartered in Canada. Our large base of our operations is in Canada. But over the last decade or more, we've focused a lot more on international growth, but still looking at what the fundamentals are, where we can get those project returns, where we can get projects through the funnel of permitting and consultations and all of the other pieces that you need to get to commercial operations. So I think we're very bullish on Canada, and I think with the demand, I mean, there's the procurements and the demand across the country. I haven't seen in more than a decade of my career. So I think we're very excited. And again, the conversations around permitting, around how do we reduce the regulatory burden on these projects, and how do we match the cycle of other demand, whether it's data centers, whether it's ISOs, whether it's just the electrification of the economy. I think it's how do we balance what we need as an investor and an operator, and what the system and the industry needs.
What is the most important piece of the Build Canada Act for you guys?
So I think it's an opportunity where I think the Canadian government has really taken a look as to what can we do better as a nation to really build out projects. And I think it doesn't matter what administration, north or south of the border, I think we all recognize that we need to do a better job as it relates to regulation, permitting. How do we go quicker? How do we really focus in bringing dollars and financing it back into, and for Canada, it's really important to be able to bring those dollars and that confidence. And so I think what this means to us is an opportunity for us to have a really close look at ourselves as a nation. How are we going to build quicker, faster, better? And I think as we think through those pieces, it's really important. And what the government has done, has announced a major projects office. They are looking at national projects of interest to identify, and it's really about expediting that process. And so what I'm really optimistic about is that there's a focus on build. It's a focus on how do we execute projects, and how do we have that really honest conversation with ourselves as to what can go faster and how do we do that. And so it's exciting. Our small modular reactor was referred to the major projects office. And so what I'm hoping that comes from those is those conversations to really understand what can be done better, so we can help all projects within Canada on a go-forward basis really be able to move quicker through its early licensing, permitting, and regulation pieces. How do we entice capital? How do we think about appropriate returns and ability for that execution? And so I think it's an exciting time. I think even yesterday an announcement on the budget that will come out November 4th about a focus on projects. And how do we think about the allocation of project dollars versus sort of the operating budget dollars that are required. And so I think you're starting to see those messages, and I really hope that this opportunity in front of us, we really take and it can really take advantage of what is coming forward, because I think that's the opportunity about being a superpower in energy, but across the nation, about how do we build out jobs, energy security, and opportunities to build out Canada.
I mean, I think it shifts the conversation from whether we should build major projects to how we build major projects. And I think that's really important. It's a huge shift in mindset in the country. Now, the fundamental question is whether these signals translate from kind of policy and conversation to actual projects. I think that's where everyone in this room has is part of the conversation right now. I know. I mean, we're all trying to figure out what this means, short, medium, and long term, and whether this moves into action. I mean, Northland is not pursuing major projects. I mean, of what's been announced, but the tertiary investments, the tertiary need for new power, excites us, and but it really means we really need those signals to translate, and some critical steps are still coming.
Can you talk a little bit about the signals or regulatory clarity that you want to see?
Yeah, I think there's opportunities, and I think it depends on the project. But I think when you think about impact assessments act as the duration to do those, I think there's opportunities. Nuclear is a unique element where we have our own Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission that regulates the nuclear facilities and all of our standards. And so how do we think about those two acts together, and how can we find ways to provide expediation through those processes while still following the rules and expectations? Nuclear safety is absolutely paramount. It is the number one thing that we need to focus on. But how do we find ways through that? How do we think about opportunities for licensing, permitting, and being able to work through those pieces? So I think there are opportunities for us, and I think it's about the ability to change and hear those. And I think they'll be unique across each of the projects. And so what I'm hopeful about is that they'll take a second, see, are there consistencies as opposed to just one project's need? How do we think about this for future projects? So as more projects get announced, that there's an efficiency that happens through that, and an understanding about how can we make that effective for more projects coming through, because it will be also the small projects that we need as a nation, the medium size, not just the big ones. We need to be bringing it all through.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, but it's also stability, right? SMRs and nuclear are 10 plus years. Some of the projects that we're being offshore, what we're doing in Europe, those are long lead time investments, and so stability across the development, financing, construction, commissioning cycle is critical. So I think we need to see action. We need to see movement on kind of, we're going to break down the barriers. We're going to get permitting fixed, but we also need it needs to be designed in a way that remains stable across political cycles, because doing this over 4-5-year cycles is challenging and risky.
Is there an opportunity, given that in the U.S. there's a crackdown on renewables, making it more expensive? Does that give you an opportunity to build more?
I think so. I mean, we're looking. I mean, Northland has limited exposure in the U.S., so we're not as impacted as some of our peers. But I think we're seeing increased kind of competition and interest in other jurisdictions that we operate in. I think the cream is rising to the top in terms of projects that deliver returns, or have a deliverable timeline, predictable timeline in terms of bringing those forward.
Any final thoughts, Aida?
Yeah, I just think it's our opportunity right now to really execute big projects and to do it. And I think we have to focus, and I think all of us, if you're an investor, if you're a corporate, if you're a banker, we all have a place to participate in this, and government officials, of course. And so, but I think we got to do it together, and I think we have the opportunities here and now, and we just need to take hold of it and really execute is going to be the most important piece.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us and telling us how Canada is going to become a superpower, energy superpower.
Thank you.